African countries need to seize opportunities created by the US China tension. With the US China tension on the rise, this is the moment, this is the time to create opportunities for Africa to grow as a superpower, not just to benefit as countries, but to grow as superpowers. Without having power, Africa can never grow. Africa will have to depend on those who have power. You have to depend on the benevolence of those who have power to grow. So this is the moment, this is the time for African countries to come together, despite the fact that we have the COVID-19. People are going to die regardless. But if you don't create the institution, or you don't create the atmosphere of where growth can pick up, we'll always depend on countries that are more powerful than us. I mean, it's for 400 years we've been going back and forth, trying to survive and thrive. Colonization, slavery. It's time for us to understand that power is the key to have control over your destiny. So while the United States and China are fighting, just like when the United States and Soviet Union were fighting, African countries lost a chance to grow. This is another opportunity. Let's let not. This is an opportunity for us to take a chance to create the power structure that Africa needs in order to survive. In a world like this, without power, you cling to those who have power, or you create the power you need to survive. Africa has the chance to create a power structure that they will not have to depend on other countries or state or other races in the world. No. Racism will never end so long as Africans or black people don't have the power to end it. And in order for black people to have the power to end it, they must create the power structure within them. So African people all over the world must create the power structure within them. And Africa must have a base, an African structure base to coordinate this. And the only place to do that is in the continent of Africa, where you have 1 point something billion African people. Racism will not end. Power is the key. I don't believe in love, but I believe in power. Without power, you can't do shit. Because Africa is powerless. They depend on China or United States or Europe or any other country that has more power than Africa. So Africa must wake up. The only way to create an opportunity to grow is to create the power. And the power that we need is the United States of Africa. Now, of course, this is not going to be easy, because since the creation of many states in Africa through the Berlin Conference, which was created, the Berlin Conference divided Africa for the interests of Europeans, not of Africans. But we Africans must do this for the interest of African people. Unite all the 55 countries in Africa under the United States of Africa to have the power structure that we can control the destiny of our lives. Without which, So long as Africa doesn't have the power to control the destiny, Africa will have to gain benevolence from those who have the power in order to grow. But that would not lead to the full potential of the continent of Africa. To have full potential is to bring the 55 countries in Africa under the United States of Africa. Now, is the journey going to be easy? No, of course not. There are going to be internal struggle as well as external struggle. Internal struggles as well as external struggles. The internal struggles include other superpowers who don't want Africa to become a superpower. We know that. And then the internal struggle requires those countries, or all the 55 countries, who don't want to lose their small statehood and regain a small countryhood and regain statehood under the United States of Africa. The internal struggle for the realization of the United States of Africa has to do with the countries, the 55 countries in Africa that don't want to lose their countryhood and regain statehood in the United States of Africa. And that is why, the idea, the Pan-African idea of the United States of Africa is not growing. But I think, because I'm a pragmatical person, I'm a practical person, I think through the 5 regions, if we can actually make those 5 regions, the East African region, the West African region, the Northern African region, Southern African region, and the Central African region, you could make those regions stronger and integrate all those countries in those regions, then we would take this to another level. From the conversation that comes, there are 3 challenges and opportunities for the African continent in the current geopolitical climate. Technological frontier is one of the challenges and an opportunity. Global supply chain is one of the challenges and opportunities. And integration and economic cooperation. With integration and economic cooperation, we'll be able to deal with the other 2, the other technological frontiers and global supply chain. But so long as there is no integration and economic cooperation within the 55 countries of Africa, what is left? Is left for those countries to go out to the superpowers, either United States, China, Europe, and seek for assistance because they don't have the power, because they haven't decided to integrate their countries with the rest of the 55 countries in Africa, and that is not given, that they have not created the power that is needed to create a better destiny for the continent of Africa. So African countries will need to work more collaboratively to develop thriving economic sectors and cross-border industries linkage. The need for African country to deeper trade integration and economic cooperation, or the intra-African trade counts for. Let me just give you some statistics. The intra-African trade, like that's trade within African countries, counts only 16% of total, but 52% of trade with China. Africa trades more than 50% with China, and trades with itself only 16%. 73% of trade is being done with European countries. That's a lot of money that is given out to Europe because they are not trading with themselves. And then if you want to combine the China and Europe together, is 54% of total trade. Only 16% of inter-trade within countries in Africa. 16. So they're left because they don't have the power, they don't have the structure that is needed to grow Africa. The countries depend completely on foreign countries to grow. This is what must stop. This is what are the African youths. Because with the continued percentage of trade with other nations, Africa cannot grow. This will never be able to grow. We'll never have the structure to grow. This is the time for why would you go as far as China, as far as United States, as far as Europe to trade with them on a higher percentage, yet countries that are in the continent, you only trade 16%. That doesn't make any damn sense. How can you grow if you're trading among yourself only 16%, but you choose to go outside in Europe, in the United States, in China, trade higher with them, giving more money to them, and then bringing in nothing at all in the continent of Africa, and then you expect Africa to grow. How would Africa grow? But if we unite Africa through the United States of Africa, which it would have bombs, of course, in order for it to gain the power it needs, there will be struggles that the United States of Africa will have to go through. But so long as they can go through that struggle, you will see more gains. The continent will depend on itself rather than sucking from outside and not being able to pay. All these high percentages of trade with other nations outside of Africa, it's not helping the continent. It's destroying it. Which is why you have countries going out borrowing money. We must seize this opportunity when the superpowered nations are fighting. We must use this opportunity to create our own superpower. Africa must become a superpower in order for Africa to survive. If we don't become a superpower, Nigeria is not a superpower. Nigeria may call itself the superpower of Africa, but it's not a damn superpower in the world. South Africa is not a superpower. It's not. Compared to the other nations that have more power, it's bullshit. Pan-Africanism, uniting the continent of Africa and creating a superpower that can compete in the world is the key that we need as African people in order to survive. All these states, it's not helping. All these countries that we have, it's not helping if we're not cooperating and working together, making sure that the continent itself survive. And the continent survive, the people survive. Africans must wake up. We must stop racism and discrimination that is happening to African people all over the world. But we cannot do that when we don't have the power to do it. We're a laughing stock Black people all over the world are a laughing stock to the rest of the world. They do, the rest of other races in the world do what they do, or they do as they please to African people because they have the power to do so. And we don't have the power. We don't. So the youths in Africa must wake up, start a Pan-African movement, protests all over the continent, shaking the core of Africa for the United States of Africa. Because when the continent is one, which it is one, the entire continent is one, but the people don't want to be one with the continent. And because of that, the continent bleeds. Because of that, the continent suffers. Because of that, blacks are being dehumanized all over the world through racism, police brutality, Chinese doing whatever they want to do to African people. Even in the continent of Africa, and the government of Africa can't do shit, can't do squash, can't say nothing, because they don't have the power to do. They have to go out there and beg China, beg United States, beg Europe for finances. When they're on their knees begging, how can they have the power to speak on the behalf of black people all over the world? It's time to create a superpower on the continent. The youth must wake up or perish, as the great Marcus Garvey said. Either you fight or you die. But it's best to fight than to die without fighting. The continent of Africa, the people on the continent of Africa are cowards because they are afraid of the rest of the world. But if you want to show the rest of the world that you have the power, it's time to take back the continent by any means necessary. Malcolm X. This is King H. I'm out.